He's definitely brutal, he's always savage, and you're definitely getting wrecked.
This is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Chet, Singh, a.k.a. Chet, a.k.a., if you're from Counter-Strike, ImAPet, which, by the way, one thing about that, obviously it's a weird name, but is the idea, because your name is Chet, like ImAPet rhymes with it? Why ImAPet? Why did you drop it?
I dropped it because it was really weird to do introductions with people, so that's a really big problem. Doesn't look professional, and I made it as a meme when I first started. I didn't think I would go pro.
Right.
I was just like a normal like chatter, like, you know, just trolling in the forums, like Twitch, all that, Justin TV, whatever. And yeah, that was just an awful name to keep, honestly. And I didn't want it on my jersey anymore. So that's another third reason not to keep it.
Obviously, people will know, as the overlay shows, you began in Counter-Strike, even though now you're actually a very famous coach in VALORANT and you've won championships, etc., and been on some of the biggest orgs. You did make your name, like a lot of people in your teams, in Counter-Strike originally. And one of the teams back in the day where you rose to fame was in CLG, Counter-Logic Gaming. And I actually have a quick question that goes like this. So the cool thing is, we did do a talk to Thorin ages ago about this era of CS, actually, when you're towards the end of your CS career, I think, as a coach. And obviously, I got to ask about a bunch of things back then. But I always think the cool thing about this series is, as we grow, mature, and do different life experiences, obviously, our memories change of those things and how we look back on them. So I actually thought one area I could ask you was, if people don't know, one of the star players of this team was Tarik. Yes, the Tarik, who carries all the stream views with his core stream and has been a giant streamer for the last few years, probably a multi-millionaire, I'm going to guess at this point in time. What was young Tarik like, for people who don't know?
You know, just like an X Factor type player. He just always, maybe he didn't always make the super greatest play.
Okay.
But you kind of need like a player who like can just like fill a void of like, he's going to do like the unorthodox play that is going to win you the series. And he, like, it's basically, he has like he's not afraid to win at all. Like, you know, like most people play to like not to lose, and they're gonna play the safe option like almost always. And like, that's not bad. You kind of need those people in your team, but having those players who are more sporadic and like can just like win you that, like get you that multi-frag or do whatever that catches the other team off guard, like it's like suboptimal, but you kind of need that just to have a chance to like win rounds that you probably shouldn't have. Like no scoping somebody. Like, I'm sure you watch Simple, he does some crazy stuff. And you know, like that's just, you just kind of need to. There's no way you can win just playing like perfect all the time 24/7.
One thing that's actually kind of cool to reflect on now is one of the first times I remember taking note of you was in the next iteration of CLG, which was much smaller names. It was kind of like a reclamation project of people. People like Kuster and Ricky from the old Renegades in. Obviously, people like FNS himself stuck over from the old era, but he hadn't gone to a higher level, right? This was an interesting squad because famously, I remember it was this tournament, you know, this one from StarSeries when we were in the Ukraine. And what happened was there was a game you guys had where you got to play against Gambit Gaming, who later that year, by the way, would actually win the major. And at the time, they were like unbeatable on two maps, Overpass and Cobblestone. And the premise at the time, Chet, was since this was a Swiss system tournament, if you play them in a BO1, it's obvious, isn't it? You get 3 bans. You just ban Cobblestone, Overpass, and then you go to Smelt. So everyone else was doing that, right? Everyone was scared because the thing is, this team wasn't insane. If people don't know, a lot of people think them winning the major was a fluke. But on those two maps, they just had it nailed. Something about the squad, something about the players was just really good. And famously, I remember your team did what to a pleb is a mega blunder. You like actually vetoed into one of these maps. But I remember, because you guys managed to narrowly beat them, and basically they didn't make the playoffs, and you guys did. The story I remember talking to you at the time was, because you knew they like these two maps and they're going to leave it available themselves, you essentially just like spent all night like looking at the demos or something and just thought, right, well, we know we can get one of these maps, so even though it's counterintuitive, play them on it. But as a result, like anti-strat the fuck out of them, figure out all different angles. And the reason I bring this story up is I think it's kind of a cool origin story. Bear in mind, if people know your career as a coach in VALORANT, you're kind of a specialist at things like comps, being able to assess the VODs in between the days and come up with some new angle and read what they're going to do. Do you kind of see the genesis of some of this back in the day here?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that specific instance because it was my first like international LAN where we like qualified and like really like had, well, it wasn't like the first, but it was like one of the few first ones. And just that day, I remember when we were doing the vetoes, we were talking about like what maps we like, and we are like, oh wow, we like the same maps as these guys. Like that kind of sucks. But also we're not super drilled like them. So they had like a lot of footage on Cobble and Overpass, and we were just like, okay, like let's just bite the bullet. Like worst case, like we veto into these maps, which will most likely happen, and we're gonna just find where this guy plays, because CS is more like chess, where like I can manipulate the pieces and I can force reactions out that I know are favorable for us. So we're on paper not as good as them. So we kind of need to take every advantage we can there. And there's also the factor that maybe they're not going to overly prepare for us because we're basically just like a shit team in their eyes. Like they're not going to care, and they're just going to play their game probably, and that honestly plays in my favor because a lot of the better teams don't want to adjust too much for a lower tier team. They want to kind of just play their game.
Sure.
And that's warranted. That honestly does make sense. But sometimes that also bites you in the foot because you're just like, oh, if we just like looked at them a little bit, maybe it would have given us an advantage. Because you always want to take any advantage you can get. And just knowing that at the time, I was like, okay, we're just gonna exploit XYZ. Maybe my opper gets like favorable picks here and there, and they ended up working hugely in our favor. We just literally countered the fuck out of them, and yeah, that was how I kind of found my style in coaching. Just anti-stratting was like a huge part of like what I like to do.
Right. One of the interesting things is this team obviously wasn't super notable at that point in time. But there's one other thing I should obviously ask you, which is you were working with FNS. And here's one of these things, mate. A bit like if people know in CS2 right now, where Lexi B just won the major. And I'm one of those people who always fought for him for years. And everyone told me, you're delusional, shut up. Even though actually, if they don't know, in that case, I even had an OP thing. I actually listened to his voice comms at tournaments. So I actually just knew he was making the right calls. But one of the other people, everyone used to tell me I was delusional for. In fact, some people even say I'm the one who got him screwed over was FNS, because back in the day, I was like, actually, if you look at the players he's playing with, like these results are way above the sort of rim, as it were. Like he's overperforming with these players, and some of it has to be him. If you ever see how he calls, people don't know in VALORANT his whole style is mid rounds. It's like reading the game, etc. And so famously at the time, I was actually someone who was sort of in the ear of Jack from Cloud9, and I was one of the people who when Stewie 2K left was like, just get this FNS guy, he's like the sleeper pickup, blah blah blah. But the problem is, as you know, they only gave him like 2 months or something, they just booted him straight out again, and then went back to some like. That was, I think, when they went to like the weird international lineups after that made no sense. So what I want to ask is this: way back then, was FNS anything like the IGL he is now? Did you have some sort of connection with him?
Well, back in the day, we're still all kind of new and like learning. Like we haven't gone through all our hardships yet. That we have like learned now, like all the lessons we've learned. But he was still really good. Like the mid round was like really good. I think he was more so developing being a leader at that time. To now, these days, his leadership is way better. I think the way you give criticism and you talk to your teammates and you kind of lead grows over that time. That's been at least a 5 or 6 year difference from when he first started with me to when we last like continued on. So the leadership difference is really different. And I mean, the IGLing, I think, is something that doesn't really change too much, though. You kind of maybe gain some things here and there on like how you want to micromanage and stuff like that. But you always have like an identity that you have where, I mean, for him, he knows how to manipulate rotates really well. And that's like something you really need as an IGL. And he can do that just as long as he knows the system that his teammates are going to give him information, like the lurkers especially, that his calling will be good. And he transferred that to VALORANT, pretty much the same thing. And like I said, we definitely learned hardships through all of our careers that kind of boosted us a little bit, but it didn't change it too significantly where like it wasn't that, like in CS, it wasn't like that different from Val. Just in Val, like there's more like nonsense in the round, honestly. So you kind of have to account for those variables in just in that game.
People might not know, but your connection with OpTic goes well beyond VALORANT, because actually this was the first destination after CLG for you as a coach. And the project you took on was one that actually a lot of people don't remember. They sort of deleted. They remember the North American one with Stanislaw that won E-League. And then maybe they remember the later one with MSL and Snappy and people like that. But there was one in the middle, if people forget, which actually I can see why this squad was built, because if you know Hex from OpTic, he likes to flex the personalities and do content, etc. He doesn't want just boring players. So this was one one that was sort of like a weird international team before we even had international teams. It was like Friberg from NIP, allu, also in NIP once upon a time, Magisk before he went to Astralis. Actually, this was the team he was on, guys, before he went to Astralis and won all the majors. You had HS. This was like a super interesting team, actually. Who was the fifth player? Do you remember? Mixwell, yes, of course. Mixwell, who originally was on OpTic anyway, but famously at the time wanted to live in Europe again. So it was like a European team, right? Obviously, this team, here's the thing, I won't say it totally failed, because it was always like one map or this far from actually doing something, get to the major, like get to like a deeper finish in a tournament, win over against the top team. There's a lot of close games. This sounds like a pretty ambitious project to take over as one of your first like bigger coaching gigs, though, working with all these big players. There's people that have won majors and been a major finals. So what was this experience like?
I mean, for me, it was really like a huge like difference between having a bunch of rookies to a bunch of experienced players, and also just a difference in culture. I've never been with players that were from another continent, so that was like all new for me. But I really valued that experience because for me, I mean, those guys pushed me and like helped me learn just how to be a better coach. Because I think I was honestly, like, to be frank, I was pretty awful in CLG. No matter how much like or how many good our results were back then for that team in CLG, I had no idea how to lead a team.
To be fair though, coaching was pretty limited at the time. You know, but even the people who did coaching sometimes were just managers or friends. You know, it wasn't like now where everyone's going super in depth, right?
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but like I feel like I should still have known certain things. Right. I was also super young at the time, so that didn't help. I didn't have that much experience. I also never played pro, so I didn't have like any like semblance of like how to be like a professional at all. I was kind of just learning as I was going. So all the experiences that went through like the European minor, we had a boot camp in NA in that Chicago house that Hex bought for a ridiculous amount of money. You know, talking to those guys and gaining their experiences was super valuable for me because those are things that I just brought out to my other teams. Like one thing famously I like that allu gave for me was he took every eco like super seriously. Like for a guy who seems like super unserious, he took those rounds super serious. Like he'd be like, "Yo, we need to do like this together. Like it doesn't matter if we have 5 USPs, we're gonna be like running down mid together. We're gonna do this, this, and that." And we actually even won a match in our minor back then with 5 USPs, just running down mid on Inferno. And I was just like, all right, like this guy knows what he's doing. And then just managing attitudes and stuff like that. Like friberg helped me like learn that. Even allu, like those two, I think had a big like impact on me because we always like talking with Magisk, and he actually had a really good attitude in that team. And those three that I mentioned just taught me so much from their teams, and we also gained a lot through just talking with each other. Just like we'd have like weekly, like, or not even weekly, like daily conversations in that Chicago house of just like what's going on in our team, what can we do better, etc. Like those are like some of the most productive talks I think I ever had. And yeah, I mean, I think if I never had that project, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. Like that was like super valuable.
One thing you referenced there is the other reason why I imagine it's tricky to become a coach is you notice most of the first generation coaches were just the IGL when he retired or some like legendary player. Even if they weren't good, by the way, just legendary players. So you have the authority, you know, you like control the locker room as it were. In your case, you're really young. You're like 21, 20 years old around this time period. As some of these players are mega experienced. They've been there and done that. Like an obvious question I have is this. It sounds like you may be locked into a good group of people in these first few teams because I know some people in your position who basically they didn't get to be called coach, mate. They were just the analyst, and even then certain players would sort of be like, shut the fuck up, what do you know, like, and it's more like you'd have to like send him an email and hope he reads it, you know. Like it sounds like you actually had a group who was sort of receptive to the idea of coaching though.
Yeah, I mean I definitely do feel like I got a little bit lucky. Like when I landed in CLG, like I was just an analyst and I suddenly became a coach because our other coach got fired. But I just had like certain I don't know what it was where people liked what I did. But I mean, in OpTic, those guys, like, we had a great time with each other. Like, even though I was inexperienced and I didn't really have like a good semblance of like leadership, like, thankfully we had friberg and he was a good leader. And then the other two, like allu and Magisk, they were always like keeping the team super motivated, super positive. Like, you can see like Magisk's impact throughout his career. He's definitely like kept his team like in high spirits because before that he was known as someone who was toxic.
Sure.
And going into that OpTic team, I think he realized that like, wow, he's like in his head he's probably like, wow, I'm in NA, like fuck, I need to like get back on track, like you know, I'm sure that's what he thought. He's like, I need to like improve, like et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, those experiences were like insane. And yeah, I mean, most people were pros and became coaches like afterwards. So I didn't have that, unfortunately. I kind of just started super young. And yeah, I mean, I just learned through mainly hardships. That was like how I became like better at what I was doing.
Oh, after this, you then also, this is why actually your career is mental if people don't know. Like, it's like you're trapped in some like time as a flat circle like that. Because if you don't know, you went from OpTic to NRG. People think, oh, we're already talking about Valorant. Back in CS, he did that. He went from OpTic to NRG. So he went to NRG, but this was when famously the in-game leader was daps, if people know him. Obviously, he was a team maker. He was in Valorant himself, if people remember. And this was an interesting squad because you walked in and almost immediately, you're back in Kiev again, in Ukraine, at StarSeries, and this is when they made the finals run. Now, true, it wasn't one of those ones with a giant stadium and all the it was like a studio land, but like this is a tournament where people don't know you have to beat like Team Liquid. There's a bunch of top teams there. You played Na'Vi with Simple in the final. It's got to be pretty dope to like you've been taking steps up in your career at this point in time, right? This is kind of a big moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, those guys at NRG really wanted a new coach. They wanted because we used to play them a lot in OpTic, and we would just destroy them online. And I think daps kind of respected the fact that, well, I would like talk to him here and there, and he respected my opinions. And he really wanted to bring me over because that OpTic project was ending, and I was kind of looking for somewhere else to go. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, whether it was to stay at OpTic and go with that another project or like whatever the case may be. And he just hit me up, asked me to join. I was like, okay, I'm down. He's like, we got like these lands coming up, and it was pretty quick, like the turnaround. And I kind of just applied what I'd like to do, like how we mentioned before, like anti-stratting. Like I wanted to push the guys over the edge because those guys famously were like pretty online. Like they would do really well in the online leagues and like get like first place, second place, whatever league was at the time. I think it was like ECA or something. And they just needed that final hurdle because they were just bombing out of every land pretty consistently. So when I joined and we made that finals run, I think that boosted our confidence for those next few lands we went to because we were just making like top four, second place, top four, and like we were just rolling. Like I think as soon as I joined, we just had a lot of confidence. Like everyone was like super high spirits, and also those experiences, like we learned a lot. We played a lot of games in that short run as soon as I joined because we were just starting to like 4 or 5 different lands. And I was like, damn, like for rookies, that's pretty good. Like you develop pretty quick that way.
In this era, obviously a player I'll ask about because not only has he been very relevant, but he's still relevant to this day. It's obviously Ethan. This was baby Ethan, though. Obviously he'd even be a CLG player himself. This was when I remember he actually started to blossom. This is when it was like the next year he was getting to like the top 20 or that sort of a range, which is a big thing in Counter-Strike, obviously. Who was this guy when he was young? Because it's funny now he's become like, he's himself been in IGL and did all these other things. It looks like he sort of blossomed as a person, but who was baby Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I've been with Ethan most of my career, from the beginning of his career to like even present day. I mean, in the beginning, he definitely missed a lot of fundamentals. Like I remember when I was in CLG with him, he didn't really understand some of the concept of like swinging for his teammates and stuff like that. So that's something he learned pretty quick. The one thing I'll give him is he learns fast. He's a very fast learner and he applies things really well. We also had like a meme in our team where he was like a 4th string opper. Like we would like
okay.
we would like other people like op over him, and now he can op like perfectly fine. Like there's just like so many things when he was at the start of his career that we just didn't let him do, or he just didn't have a semblance of like doing it. Where like as now, he can do it all. Like this guy, like there's like barely any flaws in his game. Right now he's learning to be a leader, and I think he's doing really well at that. And he's had so many like IGLs throughout his career. Like he's went through like FNS, daps, stanislaw, ones in VALORANT. Like he's seen the gauntlet. Like I think because like I said, he absorbed information really quickly, that he's taken it all and he's just easily applying it. Like this guy's a monster. Like not only does he put up numbers, like in CS he was putting up really good numbers for us, and he was anchoring sites like really well. Like that's what he was really known for. And he just knows that he can like lock things down and still be comfortable calling, which is nice in the like present day. And I think that's something like a lot of people don't have as IGLs, which like is a huge benefit for like most teams.
And then the cool thing was the following year, which people might remember was the best year of NRG, and it led later into Evil Geniuses. The big move, obviously, was Tarik came back to the lineup. So you got him from the old CLG games. But the difference is, this is a pretty different Tarik, right? I mean, he's already won the Boston Major. He's been in that MIBR project that was kind of a nightmare. And if people don't know, in MIBR, they basically just took Stewie 2K and Tarik, the two American players, and just sort of made them like the entry and the support player. Like, they just kind of like hard stuck them in the bad roles because they were all the major winners at the time, right? But what was the Tarik that came back at this point? I'm guessing not the same sort of like boisterous star player type figure. Who was he in NRG?
Well, actually, we kind of needed the same kind of role.
Okay.
When we replaced Fugly with Tarik, we were looking at our list of players. Funny enough, like Victor, that's on my team right now, was one of the players that was mentioned at the time. We had like a few names, and we were like, okay, we should probably get Tarik because we're kind of lacking like another voice in the team for like the mid round. And he was a caller in C9, and some of us had experience in OpTic with him before and other teams, and we were like, okay, this guy calls. We kind of need someone who's not as passive. He's pretty aggressive. I would say Tarik's like an aggressive rifler, and we needed someone who would just make those solo plays, hero plays, make the risky call that other people wouldn't make. And honestly, he was exactly what we needed. I think some of the rounds that he gave us were like he would just run through like a mid B dust 2 smoke, like like on a timing. And generally, I would say at the time those energy players, everyone besides him, they're pretty passive. I think literally only daps went for aggressive plays, unless you like the other guys, you just had to tell them. Like for Cirque, for example, you would just have to tell them. Breeze, you would just have to say like, "Yo, go for this play, go for this play." Like we have to like name plays for people for them to want to do it. Whereas Tarik would just do it. And that was honestly like boosted our team so much, and we were able to make like pretty good finishings and stuff like that with Tarik because he was doing those plays for us.
The problem with this era is if you're tracking the progression, it's still great. Like this is the era when people might remember you just made like 1 billion semi-finals at all the tier 1 lands. But the problem is once you make semi-finals and you're this close to beating the team that goes to the final or wins, you're going to start thinking like, where's the fucking trophies, right? And so it's one of those like good problems to have.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of disappointing making all those semis because some weird thing would always happen. We'd like not check a corner, not do this and that. Like I remember we played an IM Sydney semi-final versus Fnatic, and there's like 2 like really newbie spots we should have cleared, like under boost and like lockers and A main. I was like, oh my god, like if we just clear those angles, those matches ended like overtime as well. And I'm like, if we just clear that, we just win and we go to the final. But I mean, I still think for most teams they're not even going to reach that result, so we should be happy with that at least. But I mean, you always want more. Like we always wanted more. And we did eventually win like some events, like 1 or 2 events here and there, and made like a couple finals here and there. But I mean, I think we all knew we had more potential than that. And then eventually we ended up making a different change later on.
Since you were, at the time, even though you were actually like a top 5, top 6 team in the world over these years, obviously the number 1 team from North America, it was actually the golden era of Team Liquid, if people remember. They had the 2018 lineup when they used to have Taco, and they were like making it top 2 finishes, top 2 finishes to Astralis. Then they had the 2019 lineup with Stewie, where they obviously won the Grand Slam, etc. Can you give me some thoughts on these 2 Team Liquid teams? Because it seems like you always played them. There was 1,000,000 times you played these guys.
Yeah, honestly, I hated playing them because I feel like they were the only matchup where they just would absolutely dominate us. Like I much rather would have played Astralis than Liquid at the time, because those guys like played in a way where like even if I knew everything they did, I felt like they just had so much confidence. Like they're like our big bro in a way. Like they would just they're like literally keep sunning us no matter what happened. Like they'd be like, oh, they know this and this and this. Like we're just gonna peek and shit on you because they had so much confidence versus us, like consistently. They're like, it's a Liege versus Breeze. Like, who the fuck's this guy? Like, just stuff like that. I feel like they just had an ego, like an aura when we played against them in both lineups, where it's just like, okay, they feel like they're going to win. So we had to put like our all into those games. Like we put our max effort. Like we beat them sometimes here and there, but they had a way better record versus us. And it was pretty hard. And like map pool wise, I feel like they constantly diffed us. Like they had Inferno over us, like almost always, which was pretty bad because I think all their defense, or say I'm in VALORANT now, but all their CT rotations were way better than us, like macro-wise, just way stronger. I think that was like what made Liquid really good in both teams is their anchors and on their T sides, their lurks were super strong. Like they knew how to manipulate the macro way better than we could at the time. And I mean that's why they did so well. Is because their information gathering and their macro play was just too good. And the micro plays, like they just had good players, man. They just like they had Naf, they had Elige, like Stewie, they had Taco, like all these players, like Nitro. Like those guys just know how to make like the plays that I say that Tarik did for us, all 5 of them could do at a really high level. And that made it really hard for us. Eventually when there's like Vertigo and stuff, we started like catching up to them. Just because we got ahead on that map, but I mean that was like way later on.
Right. One thing that's funny is the way I'm even going to set this question up. All these CS fans are going to do it at the gym. Frank's all like, "Excuse me, what?" Which goes like this, right? So when they both years, I mean, obviously they briefly were ahead of Astralis when Astralis took that break and then had to climb their way back. But when they would always lose to Astralis, famously a bazillion times. I mean, if you ever look at the head-to-head, it's actually mental how many times they lost. Like they just lost like almost every occasion. Didn't matter if they won map 1, if they won map 2, if it was an overtime, they would just somehow always find a way to lose. Right? If I ask a fan, Chet, they're just going to tell me 2 things. Like, well, yes, because Astralis were the goats and they were just better than Team Liquid. It's like, I'm going to say something that's going to shock fans here. Mate, I think the 2019 Liquid was more skilled than Astralis. Like, I actually used to, for real, get mad with those guys. That's why I always said to them, like, you got to admit there's got to be some chalk going on here, guys, because when they would play, like you said, you guys, FaZe Clan with like Nico and Guardian, all those monsters, they would play against Na'Vi with Sip. They would used to dust these guys off skill-wise. They would just, like you said, they would just catch all the rotations. They'd get you on the lurk. Every time you got them off guns, they'd be on Deagle and shoot you in the head. Like they were actually one of the hardest teams to play, but something obviously happened when they played Astralis. Being as your team actually had quite a lot of success against Astralis, did you used to wonder why Liquid never won? Did you ever have any ideas?
I mean, I'm pretty good friends with Naf, and like those guys in general. So when we were talking about those like losses they had, they'd be like, yeah, like someone like didn't do this correctly, like they fucked up this, or sometimes you'd be like, yeah, we just choked. I'm like, yeah, like that sucks, man. Like, I don't know what I could do. Like, it's not in my best interest to help him, so I was like kind of just listen, and I'd be like, okay, like, because for us and my team, we would actually be we'd do decent versus Astralis. Like, I think we actually had a pretty good record versus them.
Yeah,
from memory. But yeah, I don't know how that was, but like we just played like them. I think that's what benefited us, and I think Liquid just had their own identity. Where I think maybe, to some credit for credit to Astralis, they obviously knew how to play against Liquid style better than us. But when it came to playing us, since we basically mirrored them, it was kind of like weird for them. Like they're basically just played against themselves. And since we had such a good idea on what they were gonna do, it made it easier for us to play against them. Whereas I think for Liquid, they had their own identity. So that sometimes in games, you're just gonna play against teams that just have a style that just is gonna counter you. So if you don't make those adjustments, and maybe they tried their best in some of these games to make those adjustments, but it just didn't pan out for them. Like maybe that's just too much out of their comfort zone, and they just couldn't like get that edge over Astralis because of that. So I mean, maybe that's where they fell in those matches.
And then an interesting detail is a classic thing that happened in some of these teams. Obviously, it was before your time in OpTic, but famously in OpTic, the way it went was daps like built the whole team up. They got pretty good, and then they just went. Tarik came in, and then as far as I can tell, Tarik's like, I don't know, fucking Lady Macbeth, and he's like, kill this person, and then always daps would, and you're out and in his stanislaw, and then they start winning, right? And so famously, even though it was almost a meme, the same thing happened in NRG. Like, even though the team was really good, the team got there right to the top, and then the old daps comes out, in comes stanislaw. Now look, it worked again. The team got better, the team won tournaments. Right, here's the question. It's years later now, Chet. You know, like the statute of limitations has passed. Was it Tarik that just kept booting daps? Is that the story here? Did he win everyone? How did this? Because it seems like suspicious that he joins and then daps gets booted. You know.
It wasn't just Tarik. I mean, he definitely like contributed to like helping daps get removed. But I think when we added Tarik, there was a lot more tensions in the team between him and daps. And just in general, I think daps started. I mean, I'm sure if you asked daps, he would admit it. He was tilting a bit more, like he would get more angry, like a little bit more easily. And we have a lot of young guys in our team, like Ethan and Cirque and Breeze. Like they're easily influenced by like how the environment is. Like we had a really good environment, which is why I think we're so successful. Like everyone was like super friendly, criticism super easy to give. And then once those tensions started happening, um, like it just became more toxic, the environment. And I think that kind of pushed Ethan as well, like a little bit over the edge. Like he was kind of like upset with how things were going. Cirque, same thing. So I think it accumulated over a bunch of like a bunch of events. Like we were still doing well. Like we honestly kind of plateaued. We were still getting like top fours, top twos here and there, but we were just plateauing. And then I think it was after some ECS, we were like, okay, we probably need to make a change. I think Stanislaw just got removed from the complexity or something. And we were like, okay, do we do this? Do we not do this? I had like I think I had like a 3-hour call after we lost. I think it was to Astralis in ECS. Actually, I don't remember who it was, but that doesn't matter. Basically, we were like, had a call. I had to call like Andy Miller, our CEO, and we were just discussing like, should we do this? Like, and Ethan and Tarik were in the room with me, and they're just saying like, okay, yeah, you should definitely pull the trigger. Like, let's do it. And I was like, okay, like we kind of plateaued over like 4 or 5 events. Maybe it's time we just start changing the environment up a little bit and see how it goes. So it wasn't all Tarik.
Oh, okay, fair enough. When era was going on was obviously the first year where ZywOo came to the CS scene, and your team kept getting matched against him. You actually had to play him when he was still just like a rookie. What was this guy like to face?
Oh, that guy's a beast, man. Like I knew because in OpTic in that European lineup, when we were trying to make changes, I actually DM'd him when he was way younger.
Okay.
And I was like, brother, like I need you in this team. Like, come on over. We'll give you this salary. And he declined it because he wanted to finish school. I was like, shit, man. Like, and then he ended up going to Vitality. I was like, fuck. Like I knew this guy was good. And yeah, his rifling was insane. I remember he had like this insane round versus my team on Overpass on Sands, I think, where he just destroyed us. I was like, wow, like this guy's rifling and spray transfer was so good. And I was like, I mean, we didn't play to avoid him. We actually played to kill him, but we couldn't kill him.
Right.
Like he just isolated his angles so well versus us, and we were still like developing our tactics where we didn't have perfect trades. So if you don't play perfect versus that guy, it's gonna be pretty hard to kill him. And then eventually we started running away from him. We were just trying to find him and then like go to a different spot, or play like completely to like make the other side over rotate to him, so that way the other side was weaker. But they trusted him a lot. I think in Vitality, they like made sure they didn't over rotate. Like I think when you have a player like that just has so much like mechanical skill, you can kind of like just gamble a site on him. Like he'll just play the 1, and the other guys can play the 4 or the 3. And they don't feel pressure at all because they know he's gonna like be good for 2 at least. And if you get those trades in your favor, like 2 for 1, that's honestly ideal.
That was one thing I was going to ask, because in this era, when you have insane players like ZywOo and Simple, just like almost peak form where they just can take over every game, and the joke is if their team even just makes the final, they just win like every MVP. It was ridiculous back then. If people don't know, it really was like Ronaldo, Messi, and these sorts of like famous comparisons, right? I was going to ask actually, how do you coach against them? Because I know in like a lot of team sports, there are different philosophies. Some people think you just let the star go off and you just crush the rest of the team. Some people think you put all the resources into neutralizing the star or containing them. What do you do against people of that capacity where they really can just do impossible rounds?
Well, sometimes we just try to find another weak link. So I would just like when we played Navi at the time, I would like try to hit Zeus, but then I think they understood that. So then Simple started guarding him. And I was like, okay. I was like, all right. So we conditioned it enough where he's guarding him that the rest of the map should be weaker. So then that's how we kind of played around it for Navi at least. But I mean, they were good still. Like it doesn't matter. Like Zeus was still like a good player. Like he still like knew how to like manipulate his rotations and stuff like that. Like he has obviously value for that team. For like ZywOo, like for Vitality, I mean their team was overall solid. They had like a lot of good pieces. We kind of just played it depending on the map. Certain maps we just played our own game. Like we just didn't care what they did. But other maps where it was more op heavy, like Nuke for example, like we kind of had to respect ZywOo and like just play more for like the inner part of the bomb sites, like upper or ramp, like kind of make sure he wasn't in the action. Because once on Nuke you get into that lower site and you can like smoke off like U-Haul and stuff like that, it's kind of hard for the op to get any value. So if we can force him to rifle, that was like really good. Even though his rifle's good, the positions he's playing in wasn't ideal. So we kind of like certain maps we just had to know how to push him out the site, and we did decent at it. But they still like mechanically he was still like able to win rounds.
As you referenced, there was this era, which is mad, because it even actually started at Daps' last tournament, the Pro League, before you guys swapped to Stanislaw, where there was a period where in 5 series, you only lost to Astralis once, but the bomber was the major semi-finals. Like, the other ones were really good. Look, it was awesome. Listen, there's not many. I mean, fuck it. The joke is that's more than Nitro's ever beat Team fucking Astralis, and he was in Team Liquid for years, mate. So, like, it is insane to get all those wins. And obviously, we'll talk about it in a second. But that one that got away in that major semi-final, everyone hated on me, dude. Because at the time I knew Astralis was still like powering up as the tournament went on. First of all, in that tournament, you'd beaten them in the actual Swiss, if people forget, in a best of 3. And then in these playoffs, I actually did pick NRG to win this series, mate. I thought, you know what, Astralis looks beatable. Like, they look kind of mortal. Do you ever look back on that one and think, what if?
Yeah, I mean, it was so devastating because I think Device had a really big round versus us on the pistol round on CT side, where he had 3 HP, he had 3 bullets, there's 3 enemies. Like, it was like almost like some Matrix shit. Like, this guy had like best case, like we had best case scenario to kill him, and we probably threw, I guess, because he had 3 HP as well. Literally had 3 everything. Everything was 3. I don't know how that was possible. That was like some Gabe Newell, like the 3 doesn't exist rule or something. I was like, well, I don't know what's happening. And if we win that pistol, it would have been insane. And I remember we lost that, and we had snowballed because then we bought Kriegs because Krieg was really meta at the time, and we lost all our Kriegs. And then he ended up owning us with our own gun, and I was like, oh my god, because if you had a Krieg back then, it's basically like a mini op.
It was really good,
you're just it's was way better than the AUG. So if you Device had that, and he's like holding all these like right hand peaks on us, I was like, holy fuck! Like, we just fucked up completely. Like, our force by strat was terrible. Our pistol we threw, like, yeah. I mean, it kind of sucks because I feel like we really could have made that final if we just could close out train, but we just threw it, and yeah. I mean, we ended up recovering in the next event, but still, like, being at the major and making that final would have been like really like a big highlight for most people.
Right, obviously the downside of Device's career is he won all the majors, all the MVPs, like, you know, $1 bazillion in prize money. But during the whole time he was doing that, because ZywOo and Simple, then before that Nico existed, everyone used to go like, yeah, well, you're really good, but you're not Simple and you're not ZywOo. What was it actually like to face Prime Device? What was he like?
Oh, I mean, if you want to look for a textbook opper, he was like basically like he wrote the textbook. Like, he knew every good peak to take. He was like not a super big risk taker, but he like knew how to play every passive angle like to a T. Like, this guy was like super perfect at that. He knew, like, he had the best supported flashes, like his teammates supported him the best. Like, if you wanted to watch a really good opper and like learn how to op, you would watch that guy because that's more replicable than if you were to watch Simple. You can't replicate what he's doing. Like, Simple is Simple for a reason, but Device, you could like kind of watch him, get plays from him, and like become kind of like him. Obviously, you're not going to be as good as him, but it's like a good baseline for what you can learn. And I mean, that guy just knows not to lose his life. Like, he knows that he needs to be traded always, or he knows how to get his one and fall. Like, he was basically like a very perfect opper. And like, if you could imitate that to like even like 90%, 80%, like, you would be a really like top tier opper. And like, that's what we try to make Cirque into, which is why I said like we played like them. Like, Cirque was like a really aggressive opper. Like, I would say he leaned more towards like the Simple side of opping, or like the Kenny S's or whatever. But then we try to transition to more defensive opper because we played in the system where like we played for the trades, we played for the support. Like, we didn't play for like crazy like plays all the time. We only needed like Terror to do that, for example.
One of the things is, after this event, as you say, you got right back on course beating Astralis. And I think this feat of this ESL New York event is mad underrated, mate. Because first of all, it's the very next event after the major. So Astralis has just won the major, and everyone's like, wow, they're back at their best. They've just beaten everyone. They've beaten Team Liquid, beaten you, beaten these top teams. They've won them. So everyone has them as the number 1 team again. And at ESL One New York, you guys not only beat them twice, the final was a best of 5, and they only won 1 map in this like 6-map streak that you had against them, and that was an overtime game. So like, you actually were one of the, in theory, at this small bit, one of the most dominant teams ever against the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. Right? Do you remember this event? What was the vibe like? Did the team actually sort of know like we can beat them, we should beat them? Was there a revenge component?
Well, they kind of called us group stage warriors, so that kind of pissed us off. Okay. I remember this interview specifically from Zonic where he called us group stage warriors, which is fair because we kind of were. We always did it well in every group stage, made every semi, like whatever, and then we lost to them in that major, so it's fair statement. Yeah, I mean that was like probably the best event that I ever won, like the most memorable. Like literally better than anything that I've never had a feeling where that's been topped in my career so far.
Dude,
Like
Ethan even said it, and he's so OP. He said it's better than winning champions. She's like,
yeah,
"Oh, okay, bloody hell, mate,
yeah.
okay."
I don't know. The winning in CS just feels different, man. Like
Right.
when you're on those stages and you play against players of that caliber, like I'm playing against like you said, Astralis was really dominant. Like they're one of the best teams. Like everyone was wanting to be the next Astralis at that time, and we were beating them. Like beating them was like super hard. Like it's not like we were rolling over them, or sometimes maybe we did, but not always. And just like beating those legendary players who win all those things, and we're just like known as like the rookie team, the young team, like we're just an NA team, like with so many like titles people put on us, and we were just like beating them consistently. It just felt good, man. Like, and especially in a BO5, like in that BO5, I remember talking to the guys, and I was like, okay, like they're gonna expect us like to play like how we did in every series, like pretty proper, pretty standard. And I was like, this time when we play them, we're not gonna like fuck this up. We're gonna play like kind of a bit looser. I was like, sir, I'm gonna tell you to do some stuff that's gonna sound crazy, but you gotta trust me, man. Like you're gonna run through like the nuke outside smokes, and you're gonna pick device. You're gonna win that round, and then he's gonna be scared the rest of the half. Like, and I was just like, these are like the small things. Like we just had to play loose and play to win. And I remember that talk really well because everyone like listened and took it in, and we actually like applied it in that game. And I think that's like what made us actually win. I was like, everyone just like became more loose. They didn't care about like the result. They just cared about like they just played each round to like its own game. And I think that made a big difference. And like we're all like super energized, super hyped. The vibes were really good. I think Ethan and Tarik did a really good job like keeping everyone hyped in. Stan at the time, he was also leading really well. He was kind of keeping everyone in check like between each series because that was a long series. We had like refuel during the game, like even like ESL they gave us like time to eat, stuff
sure.
like that. So we didn't like lose focus. Like our focus in that series, like we kept that our composure like really well during that entire time. So I think like all the lessons we learned lost through that major, like it all came together for that one moment, and like I think none of us would probably forget that. Like it was like such an insane feeling.
Obviously, you guys then won the Star Series later, that was on without Astralis, and then you still were a top team. People forget, like, even a bad finish would be like playoffs or like come to the semis. But the obvious question, I'm sure a million people in Counter-Strike wonder, is if the world didn't go online and all the lands go away, right? Look, it wasn't like your team was at its peak, but if there'd have been that spring major, it would have been a chance, right? This would have been another possible, like a dark horse role. Maybe things get back rolling again. Have you ever wondered? Because basically for that lineup, after that, it was like gradually it went away, and then obviously you were gone, and Zeus came in, and that was it, right? That was it for CS. Do you ever wonder, is there sort of unfinished business at the end of CS for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do miss it. I think the events are way better. Like all the experiences that I've learned to apply way more for CS. Like I kind of miss that aura of the game. Yeah, with that lineup, probably have done better. Probably. I think online didn't suit that team at all. We were kind of like at this point we played, I think like 50 lands, maybe 60 lands with that team. So we were definitely more accustomed to all that environment, and like we knew how to like thrive in it at this point. Like we weren't the onliners we once were when I first joined that team a long time ago, you know? Like we've developed a lot, everyone developed a lot. Maybe there's a roster change that could have happened in the horizon. Who knows? I don't really know. We definitely probably talked about it at some point. But I mean, like you said, I got removed, so that then things just changed for me. I ended up going to a different team in CS, then eventually Val. So I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I definitely feel like there's unfinished business in CS. Like I watched the majors now, and I'm like, damn, like.
All right, you wish you were there full ball, right?
Yeah. There's some memories. I'm like, fuck, like there's things you just can't.
Yes.
There's things in Val you just can't replicate that CS has.
As you say, people will forget this, but there was one last chapter, which is you went to 100 Thieves when it was the team that famously used to have Kassad, obviously, before. The Australians with Jacob, if people remember, JKS and Az and all those guys. This seems like quite an unusual team to join. The thing is, I actually know from Kassad and some of the players, like, it's kind of like a pretty chilled group of guys, though, right? The weirdest thing about your time there was the results are good. Like, the joke is the last tournament, you guys make like the final of the NA Pro League, but then I've even heard there was some stupid shit. Like, at the time, everyone flamed the org 100 Thieves. Like, you've dropped CS. I've heard it was some other shit. Like, the players just decided, like, nah, toss it in. Then, like, JKS left or something. Like, wasn't it something weird? Like, what happened at the end? Because this looked like it could have been it could have kept going, right?
Yeah, probably could have kept going. I mean, I left after that second place, that NA Pro League thing online. I mean, it was all COVID era during that time.
Sure.
So we were playing a bunch of online matches here and there. Like, there's no LANs, so it's kind of demotivating for me.
Right.
Because I was so used to going to all these events. Like, I think the year prior, I went to like 50 something events in 1 year, which might be overkill, by the way, but that's a different story.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but the 100 Thieves, we didn't go to any LANs, and in my head, I was like, for me, I think I probably like was a catalyst for that team dying, because when I decided to tell the guys that was probably gonna be my last event, I was just super demotivated. I was like, we're not going to any events. I don't see COVID like getting any better. This new game's coming out. Maybe it's like gonna be insane. Which is VALORANT, and I mean those guys were awesome. Like, those are probably some of the best group of guys I ever coached. They're all super coachable. Never a toxic issue. If there was, it was fixed like instantly. The work ethic was incredible. Like, JKS work ethic was incredible, and he was like pushing his teammates. He would bring like people to like practice, to like watch VODs, like Liaz. Jacob, super nice guy, did like the same thing basically, always watching VODs. Azure, same thing, always, and literally everyone on that team, Grass Faction, always watching VODs, bringing their teammates to prag early, like, just like making sure everyone is like working really, really hard. Like, those guys work super hard, which is why I was kind of surprised. Like, when I was going into that team, I was like, why are the results not matching their level of work?
Sure.
You know, I mean, they obviously had good results here and there, but it's not what it should have been. So I was like, maybe it's just like, maybe that's just their ceiling, you know? Maybe that's just the ceiling that team can reach. I don't know. That's what my job was there for. I was joining that team because we used to beat them all the time. Like, that was like a very easy team. Like, if we matched it up versus 100 Thieves, that was like a free win for us. Like, we were just literally stomped them. So the problems I saw, I told them, and we worked on them, and it helped us on that one tournament that you last mentioned, the second place finish.
Yes.
That was just like one of the nicest teams to coach, I think, for me by far. But yeah, me probably making that my last event and all the COVID stuff, I think the other guys are probably demotivated from it as well. I think Jacob missed his family, stuff like that.
Sure.
Like, it was all, yeah, everything was like all warranted. Like, everyone wanted to go home, and COVID kind of like made that all happen, to be honest.
In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, riding with me, and it is thanks to the support of the following people. This video and all of them on my channel are made possible: Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Go, Animosity, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those dinner discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.